The sun was setting low in the sky when David Morgan, a man known in the city as a self-made millionaire, stepped out of the airport. His shoes shone, his suit looked freshly pressed, and his smile carried the pride of a man who had conquered the world. He had been away for many weeks on a luxury trip, traveling from one exotic place to another. He tasted the best food, stayed in the best hotels, and closed important business deals. Now, as he returned, he felt proud, relaxed, and successful. He thought of his beautiful house waiting for him. He imagined his 2 young children running to greet him. He pictured the big dinner they would share together that evening, the laughter filling the hall, the warmth of family finally restoring him after long weeks away. David sat back in his expensive car, his driver carefully pulling out from the airport. As the city roads grew familiar, he looked out of the window with calm eyes. He believed nothing could disturb the peace in his heart. After all, he had wealth, respect, and a family that completed his life. But life, as always, hides its surprises in places where one least expects them. The empty house. When the car rolled up to the gates of his grand home, David leaned forward eagerly. He expected to see the lights on, maybe balloons or flowers prepared by the staff, perhaps even the giggles of his children running to surprise him. But the house looked strangely quiet. The windows were dark, the curtains still. The front yard, usually full of play and laughter, was empty. David frowned. Strange, he muttered under his breath. He stepped out of the car, his polished shoes echoing against the stone pathway. His driver followed him, but David raised his hand, signaling him to stay back. He walked up to the front door and pushed it open. Inside, the silence hit him even harder. The familiar scent of home was there, but something was missing, something warm. "Kids," he called, his deep voice echoing through the marble hallway. "Daddy's home." No answer. Only silence. He checked the living room. Empty. He walked into the kitchen. Empty, too. The sound of his footsteps echoed against the tiles. For the first time since his return, he felt a small shiver of unease. Where were his children? Uneasy thoughts, David quickly moved upstairs, opening each door. Bedrooms empty. The study empty. He pushed open the door to his children's room. The toys were lying neatly in place, the beds untouched. It was clear they hadn't been home for hours. Maybe longer. He pulled out his phone and dialed the housekeeper. No response. He called the nanny. No response. He even tried calling the private security guard, who always stayed near the gate. Silence on every line. His heart began to beat faster. Thoughts rushed into his mind. Dark, confusing thoughts. Could something have happened? Were his children safe? But then he remembered something. The maid. A young black woman his late wife had once trusted. She often cared for the children when David was away. Perhaps she had taken them out. But why wasn't she at home now? And why didn't anyone answer his calls? Suspicion whispered in his heart. Though he tried to push it away, the sudden glimpse saw unable to sit still, David stormed out of the house. He told his driver to circle the nearby streets. His eyes scanned every corner, every sidewalk, every passing face. Minutes passed. Then, suddenly, as the car turned down a quieter street, David's sharp eyes caught sight of something. Their dash just ahead. Under the dim streetlight was a familiar figure. His breath caught. It was his maid. And beside her, his 2 children, holding her hands. David's heart froze. A strange scene. He ordered the driver to slow down and stop at the corner. He leaned forward, pressing against the glass, trying not to be seen. His maid, dressed in simple clothes, walked quickly, her eyes glancing nervously around as if she didn't want to be noticed. The children walked quietly, not like the cheerful kids he knew. They clutched her hands tightly, almost as if afraid to let go. David's chest tightened. Why were his children out here? Why with her and not at home? The street was no place for them. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. He opened the door slowly, stepping out of the car. His polished shoes touched the pavement, but for once he felt unsteady. He stayed behind, watching them from a distance. The whisper, he couldn't hear the maid bent down and whispered something to the children. David couldn't hear the words, but he saw the way they nodded, their little heads bobbing with seriousness. It wasn't playful. It wasn't casual. It was secretive. David's heart pounded harder. Why was she whispering? Why did his children look so solemn? He clenched his fists. Anger mixed with fear inside him. Torn between two feelings for years, David had trusted her. His late wife had always said, "She is loyal. She will protect the children like her own." But now, watching her under the streetlight, doubt grew stronger. Was she protecting them more? Hiding something from him? His mind raced. Every second stretched long, heavy with questions. The hooky stepped back into the shadow, his eyes never leaving the three figures walking down the street. A storm of emotions twisted inside him, confusion. Fear, anger, and disbelief. The proud, relaxed millionaire who had stepped off the plane an hour ago was now trembling. His perfect world no longer felt perfect, because what he was about to see on the street would shake him to his core. David's eyes did not blink. His breath grew heavy as he stood hidden in the shadow of the corner street. There, under the pale yellow light of a flickering lamp, his maid walked hurriedly with his two children. He pressed himself against the cold wall of a nearby shop, careful not to be seen. His expensive suit felt suddenly suffocating. Only hours ago, he had returned as a wealthy, proud man. But now, none of that pride mattered. All he could think of were those two small figures, his children, walking silently, almost nervously beside the maid. The quiet walk, the night was calm, the street unusually empty. The maid's footsteps echoed softly against the pavement. The children clung tightly to her hands, their heads lowered, as if they had been told not to make a sound. David's heart tightened. His children were never this quiet. They were lively, playful, and full of laughter. But now, they looked as if someone had stolen their joy. He swallowed hard. What has she done to them? Why are they out here? He wanted to rush forward, to call their names, to grab his children and demand answers. But something inside stopped him. A voice whispered, "Wait. Watch. There's more here than what you see. The strange." The maid led the children down a side street, away from the bright main road. It was darker here, the kind of place people avoided at night. David's chest burned with suspicion. Why would she take them here? What reason could she possibly have? He moved carefully, his polished shoes clicking softly, each step full of tension. His driver tried to follow, but David waved him off sharply. This was something he had to see with his own eyes. A father's pain as he followed them. Memories rushed through his mind, memories of his late wife's voice. She had always said, "Trust her, David. She will protect the children when you cannot. She has a pure heart. Never doubt her." But tonight, standing in the cold street, those words felt distant. Could his wife have been wrong? Or was he about to uncover a betrayal so deep it would destroy the trust forever? His throat grew dry. He felt like shouting, but instead he clenched his fists. The suspicious stop the maid stopped suddenly near an old brick wall. She knelt down, whispering to the children again. David leaned forward, straining to hear. Her voice was soft, urgent, almost desperate. The children nodded again, their small faces tense and serious. David's heartbeat thundered in his ears. What is she telling them? Why do they look so worried? Fear grows stronger. The maid looked around carefully, as if checking to make sure nobody was following. For a second, her eyes swept dangerously close to where David stood in the shadow. He held his breath, his body pressed against the wall like stone. She didn't notice him. She turned back quickly and pulled the children closer. The unease in David's chest grew heavier. This was no ordinary evening walk. Something secret, something dangerous, was happening before his eyes. The man in the shadows, suddenly footsteps approached from the other end of the street. A tall man in shabby clothes appeared. His coat was torn, his beard unkempt, his eyes tired. He walked toward the maid with slow steps. David stiffened. His instincts screamed danger. The maid stepped forward to meet the man, leaving the children standing close to the wall. She spoke to him in a low voice. David couldn't hear the words, but he saw the man reach into his pocket and pull out a small envelope. He handed it to her quickly. Glancing around nervously, as if afraid of being caught, David's stomach dropped. An envelope. What could it contain? Money? A letter? A secret? The children's eyes. David's gaze moved back to his children. He saw something that broke his heart. His little daughter clutched her brother's hand tightly, her eyes wide with fear. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't laughing. She was scared. Truly scared, and the boy, usually bold and curious, stood frozen, his lips trembling. He leaned closer to his sister, whispering something that David couldn't hear. Tears threatened David's eyes. His children were afraid, and fear was something they never felt when he was around. The maid took the envelope, holding it tightly against her chest. Then, to David's shock, he saw tears glistening in her eyes. She turned away from the man, pressing the envelope to her lips as if it held something precious. Something painful. David's mind spun. What was in that envelope that could make her cry in the middle of the street? A dangerous thought. His anger grew stronger. His heart whispered dark thoughts. Was she betraying him? Was she selling something behind his back? Or worse, was she using his children for something he couldn't imagine? He shook his head, trying to steady himself. But the scene before him only fueled his suspicion. A father's dilemma. Instinct told him to step out of the shadows, to shout her name, to snatch his children back and end this strange night. But something else told him to wait. To let the story unfold, to see the truth before he acted. He clenched his jaw. His late wife's face flashed before his eyes. She had trusted this maid like a sister. Could it be that David was wrong? Could there be another reason behind this strange meeting? Suspense rising, the shabby man walked away quickly, disappearing into the dark alley. The maid wiped her tears and turned back to the children. She held their hands again, pulling them close. Her face was pale, but her eyes carried determination. She whispered again, her voice shaking slightly, but her grip on the children's firm. David's breath caught. The sight of it all filled him with fear and confusion, the hooking that moment. Standing under the cold night sky, David realized that his world was changing. The luxury, the peace, the pride he carried, it was slipping away, because something hidden was unfolding before him. Something that involved his maid, his children, and a secret he could not yet see, and what was inside that envelope would change everything. David's legs felt heavy as he followed from a safe distance. Every step he took made his heart pound louder. The maid still held the envelope tightly in one hand and his children's hands in the other. Her face looked worried, almost fearful, and she kept glancing left and right as if danger lived in every shadow. The children walked quietly, not asking questions, not complaining. But David knew them well. They were never this calm on late evenings. Normally, they would cry to go home, or complain about being hungry, or laugh loudly about something silly. Tonight, their silence was unnatural. It scared him, the hidden corner. Maid stopped at a narrow corner where two old buildings stood close together. The place was dark and quiet. She pulled the children close and knelt down in front of them. David pressed his back against the rough wall of a shop and leaned forward. Desperate to hear, the maid whispered quickly, her voice trembling, "Remember what I told you? Do not tell anyone. Promise me. Not even your father. Not anyone." The children nodded nervously, their eyes wide. David's heart almost exploded. Not even your father? Why would she say that? His daughter's fear. His little girl spoke softly, her voice almost breaking, "But Daddy will be angry if we hide things." The maid's face tightened with pain. She held the girl's small face in her hands and whispered, "Your father must not know. Not yet. If he finds out too soon, something bad will happen. Do you understand? I am protecting you. I am protecting him too." David felt his knees weaken. His children were being told to keep secrets from him. Secrets that involved danger. The promise the maid made the children repeat after her in a whisper, "We promise. We won't tell." David's fists clenched in the shadows. His whole body burned with anger and fear. What was she hiding? Why involve his children in lies? He had trusted her with his family, with his home, with the lives of his children. And now she was teaching them to keep secrets from him. Confusion, and doubt, but then he noticed something strange. The maid's face was not cruel, not cold. It was full of tears. Her voice shook as if every word was heavy, painful, forced from her heart. This wasn't the face of someone planning betrayal. This was the face of someone carrying a heavy burden. David froze in confusion. Should he believe his eyes or his instincts? Was she protecting his children or pulling them into danger? The sound of footsteps suddenly. David heard footsteps again. A group of 3 men walked past the street, laughing loudly, holding bottles in their hands. The maid instantly pulled the children into her arms, covering their heads protectively until the men passed by. Her body shook with fear, but she never let go of the children. She shielded them as if they were her own. David's chest tightened. He had never seen her hold them with such desperation. When the men disappeared into the distance, the maid whispered again, "Don't be afraid. I will keep you safe." I promised her I would never let anything happen to you. David's eyes widened. Her. Who was she talking about? His wife's shadow, a chill passed through him. Was she speaking about his late wife? The thought tore into his mind. Could his wife have left some hidden request for the maid? The memory of her last days came rushing back, her weak smile, her gentle hand resting on his, her words, "Take care of them, and trust her." David swallowed hard. Could it be that the maid was only fulfilling his wife's last wish? Or was this just another trick? The tug of war in his heart, the whispers grew quieter. The children hugged her tightly, as if finding comfort in her words. David's emotions battled. Inside him, anger that his children were keeping secrets from him, but also guilt that he had never seen them look so safe in someone else's arms. He wanted to step out, to demand answers, to end the torture of not knowing. But his legs stayed frozen. The maid stood up again, still holding the children close, and began walking toward another street. The envelope was hidden safely under her arm, and the children's promises were sealed in their little hearts. David followed, his breath heavy, his mind clouded, and though he wanted to scream and drag his children away, he held back because deep inside he knew the truth was close, very close, and when it came out, it might destroy everything. The street grew darker as the maid led the 2 children further away from the main road. The lamps here were dim, some of them broken, leaving long shadows stretching across the ground. David followed quietly, his heart racing with every step. He could hear the sound of his own breathing, heavy and uneven. The city he once thought he controlled now felt like a maze of secrets. And tonight, those secrets belonged to his maid and his children. The waiting place the maid finally stopped near an abandoned shop. The shutters were rusted, the paint peeling, and the signboard hung loosely as if ready to fall. She looked around carefully, her hands tightening on the children's shoulders. David, hiding behind a wall, narrowed his eyes. Why here? Why bring them to such a place? The children looked nervous. His daughter clung to her brother's arm, whispering something into his ear. His son's lips trembled as he whispered back, trying to comfort her. David's fists clenched. He had never seen his children so afraid. The stranger's Aravalthan footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps echoed from the far end of the street. David's eyes darted toward the sound. A man appeared from the darkness. His clothes were old and torn, his shoes worn out, and his face looked rough with an unshaven beard. He walked with a slight limp, his figure bent as if carrying invisible weight. David's heart dropped. Who was this man? And why was his maid meeting him here with his children? The maid stepped forward, leaving the children pressed against the wall. Her body shook slightly, but she faced the man with firm eyes. The silent exchange, the man reached into his pocket. For a moment, David's chest tightened. Was it a weapon? But then he pulled out a small envelope, worn and folded many times. He handed it to the maid quietly, without a single word. The maid's hands trembled as she accepted it. She looked down at the envelope as if it carried both hope and fear. Tears welled up in her eyes again. David's pulse thundered in his ears. Another envelope? What is in these papers that makes her cry? What is she hiding from me? The children's eyes, his daughter pulled on her brother's sleeve. Who is he? She whispered softly. The maid turned quickly, her voice firm yet gentle. "Don't be afraid. He is no danger to you, just stay quiet." But David saw the way her eyes darted around. It was clear she didn't want them to know too much. The father's suspicion, David's mind burned with suspicion. Was this man blackmailing her? Was she involved in something illegal, dragging his children into it? Or was the truth something even darker? Every part of his body screamed at him to step forward, to stop this madness. But his instincts still told him to wait. To watch. To let the story unfold, no matter how painful. The stranger speaks for the first time. The shabby man spoke. His voice was rough, low, almost broken. "You kept your promise," he said. "She would be proud." The maid's eyes filled with more tears. She nodded silently. David's stomach twisted. She? Who was she? Was it his late wife? The man looked at the children for a brief second, then turned away quickly. His shoulders hunched as he walked back into the darkness. The envelope's weight. The maid clutched the envelope tightly, pressing it to her chest. Her hands shook, her lips quivered, but she didn't open it. She simply held it close, as if it were too heavy for her heart to bear. The children stared at her with confused eyes. David felt torn apart. He wanted to shout, demand the truth, and take back his children. But something about the way she held that envelope, something about her tears, stopped him. Suspense builds. The street grew silent again. Only the faint sound of the wind and the soft breathing of the children remained. The maid turned to them, kneeling once more. She whispered urgently, "Remember what I told you? You must keep the promise." "Not yet. Soon you will know everything, but not tonight." The children nodded nervously, clinging to her. David's chest felt heavy, his breath sharp. He had never felt so powerless. The hooky leaned back into the shadows, his mind spinning with questions. Who was that man? What was in the envelope? And why did the maid keep speaking about promises and secrets that even he, the father, was not allowed to know? David's world was collapsing, piece by piece. And the answer to these questions was about to change everything. The night was growing colder, and a thin wind blew through the narrow street. David's coat did little to calm the storm in his chest. His eyes stayed fixed on the maid, who now stood in silence. Clutching the envelope as if her life depended on it, his children stood close to her, confused and afraid. They kept looking up at her, waiting for answers, but she gave them none. Instead, she wiped at her eyes with trembling fingers, and that was when David noticed something that made his heart falter. She was crying, Made in tears. It wasn't the kind of crying he expected. Not the tears of someone caught in a crime or the guilt of a betrayer. These were heavy tears, the kind that came from pain, from sorrow to deep to hide. Her shoulders shook slightly, but she kept her face turned away from the children. She didn't want them to see her weakness. She pressed the envelope tighter to her chest and whispered to herself words. David could not hear. The sight shook him. Why would she cry like that? What could possibly be inside that envelope? The children's innocence. His daughter tugged gently at the maid's sleeve. "Why are you sad?" she asked softly. The maid bent down quickly, wiping her face and forcing a smile. "I am not sad, little one," she whispered. "I am only—" "Remembering? Remembering what?" the boy asked, his eyes narrowing with childlike suspicion. The maid hesitated. Her lips trembled. Then she pulled them both close into her arms, hugging them tightly. "Remembering someone who loved you very much." David's breath caught. His wife's face flashed in his mind again. Could she be talking about her? David leaned further into the shadow, gripping the wall so hard his knuckles turned white. He wanted to step forward, to ask her what she meant, to demand the truth, but fear held him back, fear that the truth might break him. He thought of his late wife's last moments, her weak but certain voice telling him, "Trust her. She will protect them." Was this the protection she had spoken of? Or was this betrayal hidden behind tears? The silent prayer. The maid closed her eyes for a moment, clutching the envelope and the children together as if she were praying. Her lips moved without sound. David could only guess at her words. Perhaps she was begging for strength. Perhaps she was asking for forgiveness. Whatever it was, it made David's chest ache. He had never seen her like this before, fragile, broken, yet strangely strong in the way she held on to his children. A glimpse of truth, the little girl whispered again, "Is it about Mommy?" The maid froze. Her body stiffened. Slowly, she nodded, pressing her forehead against the child's hair. "Yes," she whispered, so faintly that David barely caught the word. "It is about her." David's heart nearly stopped. His wife. Always his wife's shadow returned to him in these moments. The envelope. The tears. The secrecy. Could it all be tied to her? His mind's battle anger screamed inside him. "She is hiding something from you. She is using your children. Step out and end this now." But another voice whispered softer, "She is protecting them. She is fulfilling a promise. Wait. See what she carries before you decide." David's head spun with the war of his own thoughts. The road. Ahead the maid finally stood again, pulling the children by their hands. She tucked the envelope safely into her coat pocket and began walking further down the street. Her tears had not fully dried, but her steps grew steadier, more determined. David followed slowly, his heart aching with questions he could not yet answer. The Hookie had seen the envelope. He had seen her tears. He had seen his children pressed to her heart as if they belonged to her, but the truth was still out of reach. What secret was she carrying that made her cry in the night? And why did every tear of hers feel strangely connected to his late wife's final wish? David didn't know yet, but soon he would. And that truth would shake the very ground he stood on. The streets were darker now. A few lamps glowed faintly, but their light did little to chase away the shadows. The maid walked carefully, holding the children close. Her free hand kept brushing against her pocket. Where the envelope rested like a heavy stone, David followed at a distance. His steps quiet, but his mind loud with questions. The weight of secrets every time she touched the envelope. David's chest grew tighter. What is in it? Why hide it from me? Why cry over it? The image of his wife came again, her weak smile, her trembling hands, her last words. She had trusted the maid, trusted her with their children, but had she also trusted her with something more? Something David was never meant to see? A sudden stop, the maid suddenly stopped near an old bench under a flickering lamp. She told the children to sit. "Rest here for a moment," she said softly. The children obeyed, though they watched her with curious eyes. She paced slowly in front of them, one hand pressed firmly to her pocket. Then, with a deep breath, she pulled the envelope out. David's heart pounded. This was it. The letter appears. The envelope was old, its corners worn, the paper yellowed. She held it carefully as if it were something fragile, something sacred. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. She didn't notice David hidden in the distance, his eyes burning with desperate curiosity. She unfolded the letter inside and stared at the handwriting. For a moment her lips quivered. Then tears welled in her eyes again. Words of the past, the maid began to whisper as she read. Her voice was too faint for David to catch every word, but he heard enough. "If you are reading this, it means my time is over. Promise me you will protect them. Promise me you will never let them feel alone." David froze. His chest felt like it had been struck. That handwriting, that message, that voice echoing in his memory. It was his wife's letter. The children's curiosity, his daughter tilted her head. "What does it say?" she asked innocently. The maid quickly folded the letter back, hiding her face. "It is nothing you need to worry about," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But you are crying again," the boy said, frowning. The maid forced a smile. "Sometimes. Even when people are gone, their love still stays with us. That is why I cry." She hugged them again, holding them so tightly it almost looked painful. David struggled. David pressed his back against the wall, his breath shaking. His wife's words echoed in his ears. She gave her a letter. She trusted her with it. She never gave it to me. Why not? Why only the maid? Jealousy and sorrow twisted together inside him. For a moment, he hated the maid for holding something so precious. Something meant for him too, but another part of him softer, More Fragile wondered if his wife had her reasons. The Maid placed the letter back inside the envelope and kissed it gently before sliding it into her pocket. Once more, David's fists clenched. His heart demanded answers. His wife's memory screamed at him to trust, but he couldn't decide. Why had his wife chosen the maid for this final message? And what else was written in that letter that was being kept from him? The night deepened, and so did the mystery. The night air grew colder, and the street grew emptier. Only the sound of footsteps echoed, soft ones from the maid and the children, and heavier ones from David as he trailed behind them in secret. But David was not the only one watching. A presence in the dark from the far corner of the street. A shadow moved. A tall figure leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes locked on the maid. He had been there for some time, silent, patient, waiting. David noticed him. His chest tightened instantly. Who is that man? Why is he staring at her? The maid, lost in her thoughts, did not see him. She only kept walking with the children, her hand brushing the envelope in her pocket. David's eye, a wave of uneasiness crawled up David's spine. He didn't know the man, but something about the way he stood too still to focus made danger feel close. For a brief moment, David thought about revealing himself. He wanted to protect his children, but he held back. He needed to see what the maid would do, what secret she was still hiding. The confrontation suddenly. The stranger stepped out of the shadow and blocked their path. The maid froze, her arms instinctively pulling the children behind her. Her eyes widened, but she tried to stay calm. "Good evening," the man said, his voice deep and unsettling. "You have something that belongs to me." Her grip on the children tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied firmly, but her trembling hand brushed against her pocket again. "The envelope." David's stomach dropped. Is he after the letter? Children's fear. The children clung to the maid, their small faces filled with fear. The little girl whispered, "Who is he? Why is he here?" The maid didn't answer. She kept her body between them and the stranger. The boy tried to sound brave, but his voice shook. "Go away. Leave us alone." The man smirked, taking a step closer. David's inner stormed. David's heart raced. His instincts screamed at him to jump out, to fight, to protect his family. But another thought stopped him. If I step out now, the maid will know I've been following her. She will know my doubts. So he stayed hidden, torn between fear and curiosity, anger and helplessness. The stranger's demand. The man's voice grew harsher. "Hand it over." "The letter? You know exactly what I'm talking about." The maid's lips trembled, but her voice was steady. "This letter is not for you. It is not even for me. It is for them," she said, glancing at the children. David's breath caught again. For them. A brave stand. The stranger reached out as if to snatch the envelope, but the maid stepped back quickly, shielding the children. Her eyes filled with determination, no longer with tears. "You will not touch this," she said firmly. "You will not touch them." Her words carried a power David had never seen in her before. The stranger narrowed his eyes. "We'll see." The hook. David's fists clenched so tight they hurt. He was seconds away from stepping out of the shadows, ready to defend his children. But deep down, another question burned inside him. Why would a stranger know about the letter? And what secret inside it was so powerful that others were willing to chase it through the night? The answer was near, but it was far more dangerous than David had ever imagined. The air grew heavy. The stranger's eyes burned with greed as he stepped closer, his hand reaching for the maid's pocket. The maid quickly pushed the children behind her and shouted, "Run!" But the children froze, too scared to move. The moment of fear, the stranger lunged forward. The maid twisted her body, holding the envelope tightly against her chest. She stumbled, but she did not let go. The little boy screamed. The girl cried out, "Stop! Leave her alone." David's blood boiled as he watched from the shadows. His every instinct told him to step out, to protect them. But something inside him whispered, "Wait, not yet." The escape attempt with sudden strength, the maid grabbed both children by their arms and dashed away from the man. Her breath came fast, her eyes darting for a safe path. The stranger cursed and chased after them. His footsteps pounded on the pavement like thunder. David followed, his chest burning, his eyes locked on the letter that swung in the maid's grip. The streets at night, the streets seemed endless. Empty houses, dark alleys, and broken lamps stretched ahead. The children struggled to keep up, their small legs moving as fast as they could. The maid urged them on. Just a little further. Don't stop. But the stranger was faster. He was closing in. David clenched his fists. If he catches them, the truth will be lost. A narrow escape at the last moment. The maid pulled the children into a narrow alley, pressing them against the wall. She whispered urgently, "Stay quiet. Don't make a sound." The stranger's footsteps thundered past, echoing down the main road. For now, they were hidden. The children trembled, their tiny hands gripping the maid's dress. She kissed their heads, her tears wetting their hair. "You are safe," she whispered. Though her heart was still racing, David struggled from his hiding place. David's heart pounded even harder. He had almost lost them all. The envelope, the stranger, the chase. It was no longer just about secrets. Now, it was about real danger for his children. He pressed his head against the wall, torn apart inside. Should I reveal myself now? Should I finally take control? Or should I wait for her to show me the whole truth? The maid's silent promise. The maid pulled out the envelope again, her fingers trembling. She looked at it as though it were a shield. "Your mother trusted me," she whispered, her voice breaking, "and I will not fail her. No matter who comes for us, no matter what they want, I will protect you." The children didn't fully understand, but they felt the strength in her words. They nodded and held her tighter. David's throat tightened. Her words pierced straight through him. The hook the night had grown silent again, but danger still lingered. Somewhere in the dark, the stranger was searching. The maid held the envelope close. Her children closer, and whispered to herself, "I will keep the truth safe, even if it costs me everything." David's breath trembled. He realized something terrifying. This was no ordinary letter. Whatever was written inside had the power to change everything: his past, his present, and his children's future, and others were willing to risk everything to steal it. The alley was dark and silent. The maid held the children close, her heart beating fast. She waited, listening for the stranger's footsteps. When the sound finally faded into the distance, she let out a shaky breath. "Come," she whispered softly. "We must move quickly." The children nodded, their little faces pale with fear, but David, hidden in the shadows, saw something different in her eyes now. Not just fear, determination. She knew exactly where she was going. Walking with purpose, the maid guided the children through narrow back streets, avoiding the main road. She walked with purpose, as if following a path she had memorized long ago. David followed quietly, his thoughts racing. She has a plan. She knows someone, but who? And why does it all connect to that letter? The children, still shaken, whispered questions. "Who was that man?" The boy asked. "Why did he want the letter?" The girl added. The maid only squeezed their hands tighter. "You don't need to know now. One day, the truth will come to you." An old house at last. They stopped before an old house at the edge of the city. Its windows were dark, the paint on its walls faded, but the door looked strong, as if someone still cared for it. The maid knocked 3 times slow, steady, as if it were a signal. David froze. She knows this place. She has been here before. After a moment, the door creaked open. The hidden Friende woman stood in the doorway. Her face was tired but kind, her hair streaked with silver. She looked at the maid with recognition and pulled her inside quickly. "You came," the woman whispered, "and you brought them." The maid nodded, her voice trembling. "I had no choice. They are no longer safe." The door shut behind them, leaving David alone in the street. Staring at the silent house, David struggled. David's fists tightened. Who is this woman? Why is the maid trusting her? And why am I, their father, kept outside? Anger burned inside him, but so did fear. If he stormed inside, he might scare the children. If he waited, he might finally see the whole truth. So once again, He chose silence. He pressed himself against the wall and listened. Inside the house, through the thin walls, faint voices reached his ears. The maid spoke softly, almost like a confession. "I still have the letter." Her last words. "But others know of it. They will not stop until they take it from me." The woman sighed deeply. "Then you must decide. How long can you keep this secret? How long can you hide it from him?" David's chest tightened. "Him. They mean me." The maid's voice broke as she replied, "As long as I can." She asked me to wait. She asked me to protect them first, before telling him the truth. David's heart ached. David felt as though the ground had been pulled from under him. His wife's trust, her last wishes, they were hidden from him, given to someone else. Why? Why was he the last to know? The children's laughter suddenly broke through the silence inside the house. For a moment it sounded normal to children playing, safe and innocent. But David knew nothing was normal anymore. The maid was guarding a truth. The letter carried secrets he was not allowed to see, and strangers were chasing it through the night. The question now burned like fire in his heart. What was his wife hiding from him? And why did she trust the maid with it instead of him? The answer was close, very close. But the truth, when it came, would cut deeper than he ever imagined. David stood outside the old house, his back pressed against the cold wall. His ears strained, trying to catch every word. His body was tired, but his heart refused to rest inside. His children's laughter rose and fell, mixed with the softer voices of the maid and the silver-haired woman. For a brief moment, it sounded like safety, like home. But David knew better. Safety did not come with secrets. And tonight, the truth was closer than ever. The whispered conversation through the thin wooden wall. He heard the silver-haired woman's voice. "Have you told him yet?" The maid's reply came quickly, sharp with emotion. "No, I cannot. Not yet." David's chest tightened. They were speaking about him, about keeping the truth from him. "Then when?" The woman pressed. "How long will you keep it hidden?" "He has a right to know." The maid's voice broke, trembling. She begged me. On her last night, she held my hand and begged me to wait. She said the time would come, but only when the children were ready. Only then should the truth reach him. David's knees nearly buckled. His wife, always his wife. Every road led back to her. The letter unfolds again. There was the sound of paper rustling. David imagined the maid opening the envelope again, staring at the letter written by his wife. His heart screamed to burst through the door, to rip it from her hands, to read every word. But his feet would not move. Something held him back, fear of what those words might say. The children's curiosity, can we see? His daughter asked from inside, her voice innocent and sweet. David froze. "No, little one," the maid said softly. "Not yet. But why?" The boy asked. "If it's from Mommy, shouldn't Daddy read it too?" The room fell silent. Even through the wall, David felt the weight of that question. Finally, the maid whispered, "Your mother loved him more than anything. But she knew something he did not, something he was not ready for. She wanted to protect him too." David's breath caught. Protect him from what? David's inner storm, his mind raced. What could she possibly hide from me? What truth was too dangerous for me to know? Anger and sorrow twisted together inside him. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, to claim what was rightfully his. But deep down, another part of him softer, Uyghur was afraid. Afraid that the truth would not only break him, but also change the way he remembered his wife. A strange sound suddenly. A sound broke his thoughts, a sharp crack from the street behind him. David spun around quickly. In the distance, shadow moved. The stranger had returned. His tall frame slipped silently along the dark street, his eyes fixed on the old house. David's heart leaped. He's found us. The hook inside. The maid held the letter close to her chest, her tears falling onto the paper. The children sat beside her, their wide eyes filled with questions. Outside, David stood frozen between two choices: burst inside and finally confront the truth, or stay hidden and protect them from the stranger approaching in the night. Either way, the moment of truth was coming fast, and when it arrived, it would tear open wounds David never knew he carried. The street was silent. The old house stood still under the pale moonlight. Inside, the children rested near the maid, unaware of the danger drawing closer. Outside, David's eyes locked on the shadow moving in the distance. The stranger had returned. His steps were slow, steady, and filled with intent. David's pulse quickened. He followed us here. He knows about the letter. He will not stop until he gets it. The weight of fear, David pressed himself against the wall, watching the man creep closer. Every instinct screamed at him to act, but his body felt torn between two storms, protecting his children immediately, or waiting to finally hear the truth that had been hidden from him. Inside, he could faintly hear the maid's voice. She was reading softly to the children, not from the letter, but from memory. A story his wife used to tell them before bed. Her voice cracked with every word. Tears stung David's eyes. Even in her absence, my wife still holds this house together. Through the maid, the strangers approached. The stranger stopped at the gate. His eyes studied the house with hunger, his lips curling into a cruel smile. He knew what was inside. Slowly, he placed a hand on the rusty gate and pushed it open. The squeak echoed in the night. David's breath caught. Inside the house, the maid's head snapped toward the sound. She froze, then quickly rose to her feet. The children looked at her with wide eyes. "What is it?" the boy asked. "Nothing," she whispered, forcing a smile. But her trembling hands betrayed her. The silver-haired woman frowned. "He has found you, hasn't he?" The maid nodded faintly. David struggled. David gritted his teeth. Enough hiding. If he enters, the children are in danger. But before he could move, the maid's voice rose again, firm, strong, almost commanding. "Stay here. Do not move, no matter what happens." She tucked the envelope into her dress and stepped toward the door. A tense confrontation, the stranger entered the yard, his eyes sharp as blades. The maid met him at the door, her body blocking the way inside. "You should not have come here," she said firmly. The stranger smirked. "And yet, here I am. Now hand it over." The maid's hand pressed against her chest where the envelope rested. "This letter is not yours. It's not yours either," he snapped. "Give it to me before someone gets hurt." David's fists clenched. If she fails, if he breaks through, I'll have no choice. The children's fear inside. The children peeked from behind the silver-haired woman, their small faces pale, their hearts pounding with fear. "Is she going to be okay?" the girl whispered. The woman hugged them close. "Your mother trusted her. Trust her too." David's heart cracked at those words. Even strangers remind them of their mother's trust. But what about me? Why was I left out of that trust? The stranger's voice grew harsher. "This is your last chance. Hand over the letter, or I'll take it by force." The maid stood tall, tears glistening in her eyes, but strength burning in her voice. "You will not touch this letter. You will not touch these children." David's muscles tensed. He was seconds away from revealing himself, from throwing himself into the fight, but deep inside, one question still burned brighter than the danger before him. Why was this letter worth so much? What truth was inside it that strangers were ready to fight for it in the dead of night? The answer was close, very close, but it would come at a price. The night air was heavy. The stranger's shadow loomed at the doorway, tall and menacing. The maid stood firm. Her body the only barrier between him and the children inside. David's heart pounded as he watched from the corner of the yard. Every muscle in his body begged him to act, but something held him still. He wanted to see what the maid would do. The first move, the stranger stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can stop me? A maid against me? Don't be foolish. Give me the letter, and no one gets hurt." The maid's voice was steady, though her hands trembled. "You don't know what this letter holds? You only want it for power. But this letter is not for you." The stranger sneered. "Then for who? For him?" He tilted his head toward the wall, as if he already knew David was near. David froze. Did the stranger know he was there? Or was it just a bluff? The children's courage inside, the children huddled close to the silver-haired woman. Their small voices rose in whispers. "Why is he so angry?" the girl asked. "Because he wants something that isn't his." The woman replied gently. The boy clenched his tiny fists. He can't take it from her. Mommy wouldn't let that happen. Their words were like sparks in David's chest. His children were not weak. They carried their mother's fire, even in fear. A sudden clash, the stranger lunged forward, grabbing the maid by the wrist. She gasped, but did not let go of the envelope pressed against her chest. David's blood boiled. His instinct screamed to charge forward, but he stopped when he saw what happened next. The maid twisted her wrist sharply, surprising the stranger. With one swift move, she pushed him back. David's eyes widened. She knows how to defend herself. The stranger growled, anger flashing in his eyes. "You'll regret that." Secret unveiled, the silver-haired woman's voice cut through the tension. She spoke loudly, almost like a warning. "She isn't just a maid. Tell him who you really are." The maid's face turned pale. She glanced back at the woman, then at the children, then at the shadow of David hiding outside. Her lips trembled, but she whispered, "I swore I would never say it. Not until the time was right." The stranger laughed bitterly. "So he doesn't know yet, does he?" Poor fool. David's heart thudded. "Know what? What secret have they all been keeping from me?" David steps forward. The stranger shoved the maid again, forcing her back against the door. The children screamed inside. That was enough. David could no longer stay hidden. His legs moved on their own. He stormed out from the shadows, his voice booming. "Get away from them." The stranger's eyes lit up with cruel amusement. Finally, the millionaire shows himself. The maid gasped. "David, no." But it was too late. David stood tall, face to face with the danger that had haunted them all night. The stranger smiled darkly. "Good. Now we can settle this properly. You want the letter? You want the truth? Then you'll have to fight me for it." The maid clutched the envelope tighter, her face filled with both fear and determination. David's fists clenched. He had returned from his long trip thinking his biggest challenges were behind him, but here, in the dead of night, with his children crying inside and secrets twisting in the air, he realized the truth. The real battle was only just beginning. The air was sharp with tension. The yard stood silent, except for the heavy breaths of David, the maid, and the stranger. The children inside pressed their little faces to the window, their eyes wide with fear. David had faced many battles and life-business wars, money struggles, betrayals. But this was different. This was not about wealth or power. This was about family, about truth, about survival. The first blow, the stranger smirked, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You've built your fortune with your hands, millionaire. But can those hands protect what matters most?" Without warning, he lunged. His fist swung toward David's face. David dodged, the blow grazing his cheek. Anger rushed through him. He threw his own punch, landing hard against the stranger's jaw. The sound echoed in the night. The maid gasped, clutching the envelope tightly. She wanted to run to David's aid, but her duty was clear: protect the letter, and no matter what. A fierce struggle. The fight was raw and desperate. Dust rose from the ground as fists and feet collided. The stranger was strong, built for violence. But David's strength came from something deeper: his children's cries, his wife's memory, the burning questions locked inside that letter. Every punch David threw carried years of love and loss. Every block was fueled by fear of losing his family again. The children inside screamed, "Daddy, please." Their voices filled David with fire. He would not fall. The maid's desperation, the maid pressed her back against the wall, whispering prayers. Her heart raced as she watched David fight. "Please hold on. Please don't let him win," she murmured. The silver-haired woman touched her shoulder. "If he does not know the truth soon, none of this will make sense to him. You cannot hide it forever." The maid's eyes filled with tears. Not now. Not like this. But deep inside, she knew the moment was approaching. A dangerous turn, the stranger suddenly pulled a knife from his coat. The blade gleamed under the moonlight. David froze for half a second, shock flashing in his eyes. The stranger sneered. "Fists are for men who fight fair." "I don't." The children screamed again. The maid cried out, "No!" David steadied himself, his fists clenching tighter. So this is how far he's willing to go for that letter. The clash of wills, the fight turned brutal. The stranger slashed. David dodged. The knife cut through the air, close enough to graze his skin. But David did not back down. He grabbed the stranger's arm, twisting it hard. The knife clattered to the ground. The two men wrestled in the dirt, each refusing to give in. Their breaths grew heavy, their bodies battered, their souls burning. And through it all, the maid's voice whispered like a haunting wind, "You don't know the truth yet, David, but you will. Very soon you will." The hook at last. David pinned the stranger to the ground, his fist raised high. The stranger's lip bled, but his eyes still burned with hatred. "You think you've won?" The stranger hissed. "You don't even know who protects you. You don't even know what she's hiding?" David froze, his fist trembling in the air. His eyes darted to the maid. She stood pale, clutching the letter against her chest, her face a storm of guilt and fear. The silence was deafening. The stranger laughed bitterly through his pain. "Ask her. Ask her what your wife told her on her last night. Ask her why she guards that letter with her life." David's hand shook. His breath came ragged. For the first time that night, he was not afraid of losing the fight. He was afraid of the answer. The yard was filled with heavy silence. David knelt over the stranger, his fist frozen in the air. His chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. But his strength came not from rage anymore. It came from fear. The stranger's words echoed like thunder. "Ask her what your wife told her on her last night. Ask her why she guards that letter with her life." David's arm trembled. His knuckles hovered inches from the man's bloodied face. But instead of striking, his eyes shifted slowly. Painfully toward the maid, she stood by the doorway. The envelope clutched so tightly to her chest that her fingers had turned white. Her eyes shimmered with tears. She looked fragile, yet firm like a wall, ready to break but refusing to fall. The children's plea inside the house. The children pressed their tiny hands against the window. "Daddy, please stop." The girl cried. The boy shouted, "Don't hurt him. Just come back inside." Their voices struck David deeper than any blade could. His heart cracked. He was fighting to protect them, yet his rage was scaring them more than the stranger himself. His hands slowly lowered. The fight drained out of him like water slipping through open fingers. The strangers laughed. The stranger coughed. Blood on his lips. But his laugh was sharp and cruel. "You see, he doesn't even know. You're nothing without the truth, millionaire. You're blind." David grabbed the man's collar, shaking him. "What truth? Speak now." But the stranger only smirked, his eyes sliding toward the maid. "Ask her. She knows everything." The maid struggled. David turned sharply to the maid. His voice cracked with both anger and desperation. "Tell me, what did my wife say to you? Why are you hiding this letter from me?" The maid's lips trembled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She shook her head. "I promised her. I swore I wouldn't tell you." "Not yet." David's chest tightened like a vice. "Not yet. My children are in danger. This man followed us, and you're still keeping secrets? Tell me what she said." The maid clutched the letter tighter, whispering. Almost to herself, she said the truth would destroy him if he wasn't ready. And that time has not come. The silver-haired woman speaks from inside the house. The silver-haired woman's voice rose, strong and steady. "You cannot protect him forever. Secrets don't guard hearts, they break them." The maid looked at her with pleading eyes. "You don't understand? I gave my word. I cannot betray her last wish." The woman's face was filled with sorrow. "And what about his wish? Does he not deserve to know the truth about his own family?" David's breaking point. David's knees weakened. He stepped back, his hands falling limp at his sides. His eyes were empty, stormy, lost. "I came home to see my children," he whispered, to hold them after so long? And instead, I find strangers, secrets, and lies. Was I never enough to be trusted? His voice cracked. Did she not trust me? Even in the end? The maid's tears flowed faster. Her heart ached at his pain, but still she did not move the envelope. The stranger's smirk widened. See, even the woman your wife trusted more than you won't give you the truth. That is how weak you are. The hook David's fist clenched again, but this time not with rage, only with unbearable sorrow. He looked at the maid one last time, his eyes burning with questions. If you truly loved her, if you truly honor her, then answer me this. Why do I feel like a stranger in my own family's story? The maid turned away, unable to meet his gaze. The envelope shook in her trembling hands. The silence that followed was sharper than any blade. And in that silence, David realized something terrifying. The real enemy wasn't just the stranger at his feet. It was the truth itself. The yard was heavy with silence. David stood trembling, his heart aching more than his bruised body. The stranger lay half-conscious on the ground, his smirk faint but cruel. The maid clutched the envelope to her chest, her face pale, her eyes swollen with tears. David's voice finally broke through the still night. Tell me, or I will lose my mind. What did she hide from me? Why would my wife trust you with her last words, but not me? His voice was not angry anymore. It was broken, fragile, like a man begging for air in a drowning sea. The maid's silence, the maid's lips parted. But no sound came. Her throat tightened. Every word she had buried for years now fought to escape, yet her promise chained her tongue. The children pushed the door open and ran outside. They rushed to David, holding on to his arms. "Daddy, don't cry," the girl whispered. "Mommy loved you so much," the boy nodded, tears on his cheeks. "She always talked about you." Every night, David's heart cracked. His children's innocence was pure truth. Yet the silence of the maid tore at him like knives. The stranger's poisoned, the stranger coughed, dragging himself up on one elbow. His laugh was faint, but poisonous. "Look at you, begging for scraps of truth. Even your children know more than you." David's jaw tightened. "Shut your mouth." But the man sneered. "She trusted the maid, not you." "Why?" "Because she knew you couldn't handle it. You were too blind, too proud." The words struck David harder than any punch. His chest felt hollow, his breath shallow. The silver-haired woman stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Enough of this cruelty. The children have suffered enough. The father has suffered enough. If you keep this secret, you will destroy them all." Her voice cut through the night like thunder. The maid shook her head, sobbing. "I cannot," I swore to her. She begged me with her last breath. The woman's voice softened. "And what of these children's breath? Their fathers? Do you not see that hiding the truth only feeds the darkness?" David's collapsed. David sank to his knees. His body shook. His hands clutched his face. He whispered brokenly, "I left my home to build a future for my family. I worked day and night to give them everything. And now I return only to find I was kept outside my own wife's heart. Tell me, was I ever truly part of her last moments? Or was I just a shadow?" His sobs filled the air. The children hugged him tighter, their tiny arms trying to shield his pain. The maid's tears fell like rain. She could no longer watch. She could no longer hold the weight of his suffering. Her hands shook as she slowly pulled the envelope away from her chest. Her eyes locked on David's broken figure. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I wasn't hiding it because you were weak. I was hiding it because she was afraid it would destroy everything you believed about her. And about yourself." David lifted his tear-stained face. His eyes burned with desperation. "What do you mean? What could she possibly write that would destroy me?" The maid's hands trembled as she held the letter forward. The hook the night stood still. The stranger's bloody smile lingered. The silver-haired woman's eyes were wet. The children clung to their father. The maid whispered the words David had been chasing since he stepped foot back home. "It is time. You know the truth." And with shaking fingers, She placed the envelope into David's trembling hands. Inside that fragile piece of paper lay the secret his wife had carried to her grave, the secret that would change everything. The night was breathless. David's hands trembled as he held the envelope. For so long, it had been guarded, hidden, fought over, and now, finally, it rested in his palms. His children clung to his arms, their tearful eyes fixed on him. The maid stood frozen, her face streaked with sorrow. The stranger smirked weakly from the ground, waiting for the storm to break. David stared at the envelope like it was a burning coal. His fingers shook as he tore it open. The first words inside was a single folded letter, its paper soft and fragile with time. His wife's handwriting covered its elegant, careful, written with love and pain. David's vision blurred as he read the first line aloud, his voice cracking. "My dearest David, if you are reading this, it means I am gone." His chest tightened. His children began to cry. He pressed the letter closer, his voice shaking. "I loved you with every breath I had. You gave me joy, laughter, and a life full of light. Never doubt that my heart was always yours." David sobbed, clutching the paper. For a moment, it felt like she was speaking directly into his ear, her voice echoing from beyond the grave. The hidden truth, his eyes moved down the page. The words grew heavier. "But there was something I never told you, something I feared would break you if you learned too soon. That night, my illness grew worse. I whispered my last secret to the maid. I asked her to protect it until the time came." David's hand shook harder, his breath faltered. The children leaned closer. "Our children are not only yours, they are mine and hers. The maid is not just a servant. She is their blood too." Silence like thunder, the words struck like lightning. The yard fell into utter silence. David's eyes widened, his hands trembling. He read again, unable to believe it. "Before I met you, I made mistakes. I carried a past I wished to bury. But when we married, you gave me hope, gave me a reason to live with honor. Yet I could not erase what came before. The maid is more than you know. She shares in our children's story." David's lips trembled. His voice broke. "No, no, this cannot be." The stranger's triumph, the stranger laughed through his bloody mouth. "Now you see, the truth was never yours to hold. She kept you blind. Even your wife knew you couldn't face it." David's knees buckled. He nearly collapsed, but his children's arms around him kept him upright. The girl whispered, "Daddy, what does it mean?" David's tears fell onto their hair. His heart was shattered, but his arms held them tighter. "It means Mommy loved you. That's all you need to know. Don't let anyone take that love away." The maid fell to her knees, sobbing. "I never wanted it to be this way. She begged me to wait. She said if you read it too soon, it would destroy you. I wanted to protect you, David. I wanted to protect them." David looked at her with eyes filled with pain. His voice was low, broken. "You protected her wish. But in doing so, you shattered mine." David's choice, he folded the letter slowly, his hands shaking but firm. He pressed it against his heart, closing his eyes. Then he whispered, "She is gone. The truth is here. But I will not let this truth destroy my children. I will not let it steal the love she gave us." The maid wept harder. The silver-haired woman nodded solemnly. The stranger scowled, realizing his victory was hollow. David rose to his feet, his children in his arms. His eyes were red but strong. "I may not understand everything tonight, but I know this. These are my children, my blood, my heart, my future. No letter, no secret, no enemy will change that." The hook ending the night closed around them. The stranger faded into the shadows, defeated but not gone. The maid knelt in tears, the weight of her promise broken. David walked inside the old house with his children, holding them close. But deep inside, a question still burned if his wife had kept this one secret from him. What else had she hidden? The story was not over. It had only begun.